So this last week, I actually published a book, if you didn't hear already. It's called The Bad Leader Prevention Handbook. And I've gotten this question more times than I can count. Where did you get these stories? Well, I've been in the car business for coming up on 28 years, so I have a lot of stories of my own. But I also, when I started sharing these stories and asking people if they had any horror stories of their own of really bad leaders, I got a lot shared with me. And the trouble is that I asked this question publicly on my social media forums, and I didn't get any answers. So I thought, okay, well, maybe it is only me. But the private conversations that I had, text and phone conversations and email conversations that I had with people, that was pretty staggering. So not only are people having experiences with bad leadership, but they're afraid to talk about it. And I absolutely know how they feel, because I've been in those situations where I've been in a bad leadership situation and I was fearful of my job to talk about it. And I think I pointed this out pretty heavily in my book. So let me start from my book. The book, the way I wrote the book, I must have scrapped and rewrote that book about 3 different times, because I really am not trying to call anybody out other than the bad behavior itself. Because there's a motivating factor for someone to behave like that. That people just aren't inherently, well, with a couple of exceptions, people just aren't inherently evil like that, or inherently bad like that. There's several circumstances that had to lead up to them being a bad leader, whether they had a bad leader themselves, whether they had a bad childhood, whatever it was. Like, there's circumstances that led up to them being a bad leader. And if they've got everyone at their company so afraid to speak up and tell them, hey, you suck at this, for fear of being fired, then no one's going to tell them. And they're going to forever go through life just being a really crappy leader and wondering why their businesses keep failing, and wondering why no one will work for them, and wondering why they have such a bad reputation. So the way I wrote the book was completely anonymously, and kind of like a more, don't do this. Like, this behavior is what being a bad leader is, so don't do this. And that's kind of the perspective that I wrote it from, more than this person at this company did this activity and so they're a bad person. So what my book is really talking about is the behavior of the bad leader. And yes, this behavior makes you a bad leader. So reading the book, I think that's something to keep in mind. Is it's not so much calling out a person or persons for them just being a bad person. It's calling out the behavior. Because, as I said, I don't know if anybody's ever told them they were a bad leader. Now, do I think they're smart enough to know that, yeah, that's inherently not a good thing that you did? Yes, I absolutely do think that. But again, the personalities that I've dealt with in the car business, they might not equate that. They might equate that with, yeah, I have to do those things. Those things are part of being a leader, period. Not necessarily. There's plenty of highly successful people out there in the world that don't treat their employees like that. Plenty of them. And I'm very happy to say there's far fewer out there now bad leaders. But the amount of stories that I had gotten, and it's usually from people who've been in the business 10 years or longer. That's what I noticed. Because that was the follow-up question I asked after I was told whatever their story was of a bad leader situation, is they had been in the business for 10 years or longer. So that was a unique detail that I found, that I'm hoping that as we're going into, those people are going into their second decade, I'm going into my third decade in the car business, that those bad leaders are becoming fewer and fewer, because there's just less people willing to put up with that behavior. So I guess from that perspective that I wrote the book, I feel so far it's been pretty well received. I feel like there's been a lot of people that have purchased the book and a lot of people the couple of people I had proofread the book, but a lot of people that have scanned through the book, not read it, but scanned through the book, have said that it really presents it in a unique way that doesn't call out the person, but calls out the behavior. And that's exactly why I intended it to be. So I'm happy that's resonating with the couple of people that have given me feedback so far. But I really hope that at the end of the day, if I can just make one leader rethink the way that he treats his employees, rethink the way that he treats his sales teams, just rethink the way that he treats people who are the only reason he's in his job. If I can make one leader rethink that and just be a better leader, a stronger leader, then I feel successful. I'm not out to make, $10 million and sell 20 million copies of my book or, whatever. I'm not out for that. Those stories needed to be heard. Those stories needed to be told. Those behaviors needed to have light shed on them. Because it's just not the way to treat. It's not the way to treat people, and it's definitely not the way to treat people in a successful business if you want to remain successful. Because really good quality employees, they're very hard to come by. They've always been very hard to come by, and they're even harder to come by right now. So you don't really gain anything except losing good quality employees by treating people like that. So like I said, if I have one leader that rethinks that behavior and decides, you know what, I'm going to take the steps to not be a bad leader. I'm going to take the steps to treat my team better. I'm going to take the steps to own my mistakes and hopefully move forward from them. Then I consider that a win. And that's kind of how I look at it. Yeah. I hope that helps. Happy selling.